Let's do a whole chapter tonight. 1 Peter 4, tell you what, we're going to do a whole chapter tonight, or at least I think we'll do a whole chapter tonight, is there's a lot of repetition, a lot of things that we've talked about in the class already and have addressed, and there's some repetition. I found it interesting that Peter was so repetitive when I don't find that kind of repetition in Paul. But here, he's obviously concerned about some things, and you'll see that how important all of this is to Peter, that he gets this message across. So we'll do it in two sections, verses 1 through 11, and then verses 12 through 19. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with this same attitude, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. As a result, they do not live the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans chose to do, living in debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. They are surprised that you do not join them in their reckless, wild living, and they heap abuse on you. This is really a clear picture of what's happening to the believers in Asia Minor. You get this feeling all along, and he alludes to this suffering of the Christians. And here I think he says, this is what's going on, and he lets us in on this as secondary readers that we are. But they will have to give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this is the reason the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to human standards in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the Spirit. I will explain that, okay? That I had to find out what that meant myself. The end of all things is near. Therefore be alert and of sober mind, so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. All right, let's go back. Using these same slides over and working our way through it. Since Christ suffered in his physical body, we ought to arm ourselves. Notice that in the first verse, second line there. We should arm ourselves with the same attitude. If Peter had the whole armor of God like Paul does in the book of Ephesians, this is a similar word, but not the same word. This is the only place in the New Testament this word appears in the Greek New Testament. It's the only place. So to find out what it means, we actually have to go to other places in ancient literature, and it is used in other places. But it's a different kind. Arm yourself means prepare yourself. The noun, this is a verb. If you arm yourself, you're taking up arm. But taking up arms, that's a noun, okay? So there is a noun form of this word arm, and it means armor, basically. Basically means armor. But some depth here. It is used this one time, but it is a paradoxical thing that Peter says here. Let me explain. Paradox is a seeming contradiction. What he says is, you need to pack a peaceful attitude. If you're going to carry a peaceful attitude about suffering. Okay? That's a weird way. It would be like saying to those that ostracize and ridicule and make fun of them and oppress them for what they believe. It would be like saying, I'm going to unholster my gun of peace. Arm yourself with this attitude, with an accepting attitude. Arm yourself with that. with suffering. Have a peaceful attitude of acceptance towards suffering. And the reason that we do that is because Jesus did. When Jesus suffered, he took it. So you unholster that that weapon, which is this attitude. Is there a significance to Peter's admonition to arm oneself with an accepting attitude towards suffering? Is there any irony in him giving this command? Can you remember? That picture should help. That's Peter with a sword, you know. Yes, the night Jesus was betrayed, and the high priest's servants. That's a really Middle Ages piece of art there. Okay, that's Peter slicing off Malchus's ear. He's the high priest's servant. Okay, and here's Peter telling us now. Well, you arm yourself not with a sword. You arm yourself with acceptance that this is what God has called us to. And we should not be surprised by this. Should not be surprised by this. And he actually says that later. But I got to thinking, wait a minute here. Peter, he didn't exactly display that in his life, did he? And here he is telling us. It must have gotten in his head, right? When Jesus said, what did Jesus say when he did that? What did he tell Peter? He said, what happens to people who live by the sword? They die by the sword. That's right. And here he's saying, in this passage, he learned something, didn't he? He said, now you arm yourself with this acceptance that Jesus had. Now, let's go back to the passage itself. Peter, in the last sentence of that first verse, that is really, there's a lot of depth here, and I found more here to chew on, to think about. He says that you arm yourself with this acceptance of suffering, like Jesus did. And then he tacks on this statement. He says, because whoever suffers in the body is done with sin. Man, that's deep. Okay, I want to. What do you think? What do you think that means?
I think it means just what it said. I think that you forget about all the everyday things in life, all the normal human desires, because you're suffering. And when you're suffering, you're not thinking about going out and partying and doing all that kind of stuff. And suddenly everything else becomes inconsequential to what you're going through and what you're going to go through as you die. In fact, every single one of the apostles except John suffered a martyr's death. Peter died upside down. Some of them got flayed to death with knives and horrible lives. He's getting them ready for that.
Yeah.
And they knew they were going to face it.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how they did it because I don't think I could do it. I'm with Peter when it comes to running from pain.
I don't know of many people who run toward pain.
No, I don't think.
Gabe?
Talking about Peter, people are saying this, I'm not sure, right? Peter wanted to be crucified upside down, he didn't want to be like Jesus, is that true?
That is part of tradition, yeah. That he did not want to,
like Jesus.
he felt unworthy to die like Jesus did. Yeah. Think about that for a minute. Like crucifixion isn't bad enough to have to stand you on your head to do it. I mean, goodness.
This is after Peter, of course, betrayed Christ, and he's sorry for it, and he's trying to make up for it.
Well, it's no question about it. This probably was written about 20 to 30 years after that happened.
He's sorry.
Yeah. Well, he certainly learned something, didn't he? And he's guided by the Holy Spirit, obviously, to write this. But that insight about being done with sin, the things of this world do not, if you've suffered for Jesus, the things of this world, you've thrown your lot in with Jesus big time when you've done that, when you've suffered for him. You've, in a sense, given your life already to Christ if you're suffering for him. So, Yeah, it's you're kind of done with sin. You know, interestingly, I thought also this is kind of parallel to Jesus, right? He's mentioned Jesus as the primary example of how we deal with suffering. But was not Jesus done with sin when he died on the cross? When he finally breathed his last?
He was done with sin when he was born.
Yes, but he fought it all of his life.
Yes.
He was tempted, truly tested, okay, without a doubt. And I don't want to I want to come back. I want to stop for just a moment and say something. There are some people who teach that there's just no chance that Jesus could ever have sinned, that just wasn't going to happen. If that were fixed, then nothing was a temptation then. It wasn't a real testing. If Satan took Jesus into the wilderness and there was no way possible that he could have ever fallen because he's the Son of God and divine and could not have sinned. If that you're saying that, then you're saying it basically wasn't a real temptation. That everything was already fixed, that all the future was fixed, that Jesus' destiny was fixed, that he didn't have a choice. Remember, he says, I lay down my life of my own accord. That's saying, I'm deciding this. I'm doing this. So at every turn, Jesus was attacked by Satan and by his fleshly nature, which he was born with, okay? And so he dealt with that every single day. But to get to the very end of your life, to die as a sacrifice for sin, and then when you breathe your last, to me this says something. When Jesus said, it is finished, meaning I've reached my goal, my job is done. Basically, that's what he said, my job is done. He was at that moment done with sin. He had atoned for it, it was done. And so and Peter's this is not an accident. Peter says suffering for Christ is suffering with Christ. And people who suffer with Christ are done with sin, just like he was. When he breathed his last, when he suffered the worst at the very end, he was done with sin. He had dealt with it. He wasn't done with it in the way that we're done with it, because we're sinners, okay? But Jesus was done with it because he was finished. There was an end to his suffering. And he was done with sin when he suffered for it. So anytime we suffer for Christ, whatever that may look like, it is joining, it is fellowshipping in what Jesus has already done. And Paul said he did that too. He died with Christ. You know, I think this is all part of it. People who die and those that suffer are really done with sin, because there's such a cost. Like you said, Joyce, there's such a tremendous cost that you can't think of any, when you've made that decision to follow Jesus, there really isn't any turning back once you've suffered for him, so. Any other thoughts about that, being done with sin? Have you ever known somebody who had a terrible health event in their life and talked to them before, know them before, and then after that terrible health event or that accident or that loss, and you see the change? They say things like, the things that used to matter to me don't matter to me now as much or at all, okay? That's what this is about. You suffer for Jesus, there are some things that just don't matter anymore. They're not important anymore. So we get a kind of a new clarity about life when we suffer for Jesus. We get a clarity about that. Any other thoughts about that? It's difficult to suffer, but it certainly is life-changing when we do. Life-changing, in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah, Paul, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How come it's so hard? People nowadays, they say, if God's so loving, why, people are dying war,
Yeah.
and children are dying cancer and everything. People, I was saying that how can a God be like that?
Yeah.
You know, that's what people tell me.
How do you answer? What do you answer, Gabe? What do you
So,
say?
well, I say it's the devil. Satan is the one who's destroying everybody.
Okay.
We have to get closer to God.
Okay.
But a lot of people wonder why God is so cruel. You know, that's a way people say.
Yeah. They blame him for everything that happens.
Yeah, but they say everybody's dying of cancer, young people, young kids, babies,
Yeah.
and everything. They say, if God's so loving, why he provide all this stuff? That's what
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah.
But I know the devil is the one behind. He's the one destroying everything.
I think that's a good answer. There's some misconceptions, I think, about God's part in the world. And I'm not sure I have all the
You know,
answers.
a lot of people don't want to believe in God because
Well.
if it's not God, why he died for me that?
Right.
You know, like innocent people you can kill every time.
Right. Right. And then I say, well, God, the Son of God, died unjustly, horribly, for our sins.
Yeah, that makes sense.
He was the victim of the worst Satan could throw at him. Yeah, yeah.
That's
The-
a good answer right there.
You know, the problem, there's, of course, they call it the problem of God. You know, the problem of God is that God allows all this stuff to happen. I think atheists have a problem, agnostics. It's the problem of good. Who defines good and where'd that come from? If all we are animals, then why would we even care what's good and what isn't? The problem of good, I think, is just as challenging a question to unbelievers as the problem of God is. I don't know all the answers.
There's things that we're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a plan, so.
We mentioned Job last week. What if Job had known what was going on? Well, he would not have understood even if he knew. Well, we're writing a book about you, Job. Yeah. And Satan came and wanted me to talk to you, and
He has it, but he had so much faith.
he did.
It's
Yeah.
hard to be like a Job.
He had a tremendous amount of faith, but let me tell you, he really wrestled with it. He suffered terribly. He had 3 miserable friends who kept accusing him of having done something wrong in his life. So he had a terrible time. Yeah.
Even the wife that he had,
Oh yeah.
she was in on it too.
Yes. Yeah. She said just.
In on it, but she didn't understand it.
She certainly didn't.
She was not able to face.
Right. So anyway, yeah. But if you lay down your life really, and you give yourself over to suffering, knowing that you're going to be criticized, knowing that you're going to be ridiculed or oppressed, or as I read a couple of weeks ago about a guy who can't get a job in Pakistan. He's trying to find work. He can't get work because they don't employ non-Muslims in his community in Pakistan. So, Joyce?
Paul, right here in the United States, if you do become like this, like Peter's trying to get us all to become, and start suffering, and your mind turns away from the worldly things, the world around us, even here in the United States, they think you're abnormal. They think you've gone overboard, you know.
Times really haven't changed all that much in
You've gone overboard, but they'll accuse you of being overboard. You're stepping.
Yeah.
Reading all this.
Yeah. Well, in 1900 years, people haven't changed much, have they?
No, they haven't. It's the same way.
Why won't you go to our parties? Did we read that passage? Why don't you go to our parties? Why don't you go and drink with us? Why don't you go and party with us? Well, he calls it a reckless way of living. Peter does. Yeah.
To me, that
Well,
doesn't even sound like that.
yeah.
It's just not the way to go.
Yeah. Well, this is the point here. He says in verse 3, he says, well, you've spent enough time in the past doing what pagans choose to do. And then he goes on. He says, debauchery, lust, drunkenness, orgies, carousing, and detestable idolatry. That about covers everything that's bad. Okay. And then in verse 4, he says, and they are surprised that you don't partake in this with them. They're surprised.
Most teenagers go through a stage where
They do.
all that, and
They
it's
do.
considered normal.
Yep. And then in verse 5, Peter just puts it down. He says, hey, they're going to stand before God in judgment someday. That's what verse 5 says. They will have to give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. And then in verse 6, we get to this really, I think it's a difficult passage because of the way that it is translated. There's not a real good translation of this, at least one that makes sense to me until I found one in preparation for this and found several different places that basically agree with this. It says, for this is the reason the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead. Okay, the gospel's been preached to people who are now deceased, so that they might be judged according to human standards in regard to the body. There's their actions as when they were alive, but live according to God in regard to the Spirit. So I really wrestled with that. What does that mean exactly? Well, let me, wait a minute, have I not got it here? Here it is. Here's the NIV, which I just read to you a moment ago, all right? Look at the New Living Translation. This is why, and I think this is right on target. That is why the good news was preached to those who are now dead. So although they were destined to die like all people, they now live forever with God in the Spirit. Okay? That really is the meaning of that passage. Checked and compared several different sources. I think the New Living Translation makes it a little more clear than even the NIV does, and most of the time I like the NIV's translations, although it is not a perfectly perfect translation. Okay? But that's the deal. That's what that means. He says it was preached. Those who have died are going to have to stand before God. Okay? They're alive in the Spirit. They've gone to heaven, basically. They're alive in the Spirit, all right? They live forever with God. Okay? And that they preached, good news was preached to them so that they might be alive now, is Peter's point. Okay? He said, you can go ahead and participate in all this other stuff, all the parties and all the idolatry and debauchery and lust and orgies and drunkenness and go all through that. He says, you can go through all that stuff, but you die. He says, the good news was preached so that the people who are now dead are actually alive, is what Peter's saying. They're actually still alive. Does that make sense, everybody?
The New American Standard gives it a little bit different.
Okay.
For the gospel has for this purpose been preached, even to those who are dead, that though they are judged in the flesh as men, they may live in the Spirit according to the will of God.
Okay.
And Christians are trying to do that. I mean,
Yeah.
they're doing it every day. They're trying to live according to
Yes.
God's will.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, let me ask these questions here real quick. What might have been some of the criticisms Christians heard then and now? And I think I mentioned some of them. What would be some of the criticisms we might hear today of people who are not believers at all?
Well, they would be mocked and made fun of because they said that their Lord, even they were there, they saw him die, that they said the Lord is alive.
Okay.
That was a big thing, I think,
Okay.
because the Christians claimed that Jesus arose and was going to live forever. And those are the areas that you're nuts, you're crazy.
Okay.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, that's one of them. That's one criticism, I'm sure. Yeah. Why is there hostility for Christ's followers in our culture? And why was it then? What's going on here that there'd be hostility?
Because they think that we think we're better than them.
Okay, that's a common criticism. Yes, that you're a goody two shoes or.
Trying to be better, we don't necessarily think that we're better.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be.
Yes.
You're a hypocrite, because you still sin,
Mm-hmm.
and then you judge us for sinning.
Okay. Yes.
That's true.
Yeah. That actually our lives, in a sense, are condemning of those who are not regenerated, who are not alive in the Spirit, if you will. So, okay.
Because we make choices that are different from what the world around us would make. Things that are important to us are not important to the world around us.
Okay.
You waste your time Sundays going to church, Wednesday night.
They
You
don't,
could be out running around with us.
Right.
they don't want to give up their ways. That's
judge. You know, you preach the word to them, and you judge them.
Right, right. Oh, that's a common,
Like I'm
yes.
going,
Yeah, you're judging.
I should
Yeah,
not
yeah,
speak.
yeah. I say, I'm not judging, I'm proclaiming good news. Because the important thing is that it sound like good news.
They might say, if we wanna kill our babies, what's that to do with you?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
You know, I think another one is that back then, just as today, people wanna know why we think our God is better than their God.
Yeah.
But it's not that we think our God is better. We know it because we know we have a living God where any other God is not living. But they don't understand it that way because they think their God is living too. And so there's a lot of judgment there that's untold.
Okay.
That's where you need miracles. I mean, if they see you doing miracles, then they're going to be, but if you don't have miracles to show them,
Yeah.
they're just going to say, oh, you're just like us, but everybody thinks that they're right.
Well, Christ did all kinds of miracles and they still didn't believe it back then.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's true.
That's true.
That's true. Yep, it's true. Yeah, 1 minute they're about to, where was this, in Ephesus? They were, they were ready to declare them gods,
Yeah,
and it wasn't before the day was over. They were trying to kill them
yeah.
the same day. So, yeah. Then Peter, he lowers the boom, and he says, well, let's go back. I'm sorry, this is kind of all mixed up. He says, the end of all things is near. What do you mean by that? Now that we're 1900 years after this, how did this happen? I mean,
Well, the end is near because our life is but a fraction.
okay.
Eternity, we're not even a speck of size of time versus what eternity is.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we live to be 1,000 years old, you're still, it's still here because you're gonna eventually die, and once you die, then you live
Okay.
eternally.
Okay.
How do I live to be 1,000?
1,000 years is nothing in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000 years isn't very long to God.
And also, a lot of those people back then thought the end was truly near.
Yes, it was. It was.
That's why the
Yeah.
Thessalonians were doing, what they were doing.
Yes. There was it was widely thought that in light of what Jesus had said about his coming back in the Gospel of Matthew, when he said that there will be some of you standing here who will not taste death before you see the kingdom of God come with power, they thought that was the end of time. It was really just the kingdom of God coming on Pentecost. Okay? So, how's the end of everything near? It's close. Either the Lord's going to come or we're going to die. So either way, that's the end. So you need to live your life like that. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's still not gonna be the end.
That's true.
It's still not gonna be the end. It will be for pain, suffering, and sin and all of that, but it's not the end, it's just the beginning.
Yeah. Right. The end of one age and the beginning of a new one. I was looking at some of these passages in 1 Corinthians, in 1 Peter, and we're going to let's just go ahead and jump right ahead. I'm jumping ahead. Verse 12, since we've got about 15 minutes or less. Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you are going through as if something strange were happening to you. It wasn't until just a few minutes before we started class that it dawned on me that Peter had mentioned surprise in the same chapter. If you go back to the first part, in 1 Peter 4, verse, where is it? 4. Okay, 1 Peter 4:4. He speaks of lost people who are unbelievers. He says, they are surprised that you do not join them in their parties and all. Okay, that's in 4:4. But if you go to 4:12, he says, now, dear friends, don't be surprised at what's happening to you. Use the same kind of phraseology. Found it interesting, Peter. That's not an accident. Peter's making a point. He says, they're surprised that you're not engaging in their sinful activity. He said, don't be surprised at their surprise, because this is the fiery ordeal that's coming. This is persecution. This is suffering for being different, for standing with Christ. Instead, he says, be very glad, for these trials make you partners with Christ in his suffering, which I've already mentioned. But see, I mentioned it because Peter had already written it. So anyway, for these trials make you partners with Christ in his suffering, so that you will have the wonderful joy of seeing his glory when it is revealed to all the world. Man, that is a day worth waiting for. Okay? His coming is going to be wonderful. He says, if you're insulted because you bear the name of Christ, you will be blessed, for the glorious Spirit of God rests upon you. If you suffer, however, it must not be for murder, stealing, making trouble, or prying into other people's affairs, but it is no shame to suffer for being a Christian. Praise God for the privilege of being called by his name. We keep going. Verse 17. For the time has come for judgment, and it must begin with God's household. And if judgment begins with us, this is going to be in verse 17, and if judgment begins with us, what terrible fate awaits those who have never obeyed God's good news? And also, if the righteous are barely saved, what will happen to godless sinners? We'll talk about that in a moment. Won't take long to explain it, but it needs explaining. So if you are suffering in a manner that pleases God, keep on doing what's right. Trust your lives to the God who created you, for he will never fail you. Peter has several things that he wants to say about these people, about them being partners with him in the gospel. He tells them that they need to love each other deeply from the heart, okay? He tells them that they must not suffer for being a Christian. For being a Christian, not for other reasons. What am I looking at here? 12 through 19. What Peter does here in this passage is he turns suffering inside out and upside down. That's what I call it. Why should we not be surprised that we should suffer for Christ? Because that's what followers of Christ do. They suffer. This is part of our calling. Paul told Timothy this. He said, if you live a life to give glory to God, you're going to suffer. Expect it. Expect it. Right. Suffering has new meaning in Christ. Suffering has new meaning. And suffering is a blessing to us. Now, verse 17 really puzzled me, and I'm not sure that this is exactly, I'm going to just be honest with you, I'm not sure exactly if this is the right interpretation or not, but where it says, the time has come for judgment, and it must begin with God's household, meaning it begins with us. And if judgment begins with us, what terrible fate awaits those who have never obeyed God's good news? Judgment is not going to begin with the obviously wicked. It will start with us. I don't know if he's speaking chronologically. Maybe he is. Speaking chronologically, that the judgment of sinners, of people who have rejected God, will come first. I don't know exactly. But he says the judgment is going to begin with us. And even from God's perspective, okay, even the best of us is still in need of his grace. And I think that's the point that Peter's making. He's saying if the best of us need God's grace and his forgiveness every day, every moment of every day, then those who are just out there living like they want to in open rebellion to what God wants, he said, you think they got a chance? No, they don't. Judgment is awaiting them. So he's not just saying we're barely saved. What he's saying is that by the blood of Jesus, that's that thin red line, if you will, that thin red line that separates those who are alive to those who are spiritually dead. The red line, that blood of Jesus, by faith in the blood of Jesus. That's that red line that flows down through the universe, through all of our hearts. Will we walk with him? And here he's saying that that the unholy are going to receive terrible judgment. He says, look what's going to happen. Look what's going to happen to the people who are mistreating you. You can't imagine. He says, if people who are good need God's grace every day, you can't even imagine how bad it will be for those who are in open rebellion to God's will. I think that's the meaning of the passage. I'm open to input on that or any other illumination on that passage. But it's really a statement of warning to the world. Need to get right. Need to get right.
What about those that never hear the gospel?
Oh, what about those that never hear the gospel?
I think they get a better, I think they get another chance.
Well, a lot of people believe that.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah.
Well, it says something in the Bible about they will not be judged until they know the gospel and then they reject it. I read that somewhere in there.
I don't know.
When I read it, I thought to myself, well, then why do we send missionaries to try to get them to be judged? So then they'll surely go to hell.
We send them because Jesus said for us to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
And His glory goes throughout the whole world when we do this. When you speak in your neighborhood to someone about the gospel, you're bringing glory to the neighborhood and to that individual's life. Whether they accept it or not, God's getting glory for that. Somebody knows.
You were using a few minutes ago. God sent His word to those who had died but had not heard the message so that they could be saved.
Mm-hmm. Is that what that said? That verse says?
Everything?
I
Does that cover?
Hang on a second. Is that what that verse says, though? Hang on.
I think that's what you read.
Did I miss that? Let's see. Okay, verse 6.
Preach to those who are dead,
Yes.
so that they might be judged by that message
Mm-hmm.
in regard to the body.
Right.
And live according to God.
Mm-hmm.
Does that apply to those that don't hear the message today?
I don't think that does. I don't think it does.
Well, it's saying that those people could not be saved unless they heard the message.
think that's just talking about
I think what he's saying there is that he's speaking of their brothers and sisters who are dead. Okay? That's what I think. That's my interpretation of the passage, is that they're judged by human standards in regard to the body. In other words, people look at them and did they do good in their lives? But he said, but they're actually still alive. They live according to God in regard to the spirit, so that their spirits are alive.
Alive in the spirit.
Right.
But it says that they had to hear that message, or they would not have been saved.
Well, I agree. They had to hear the message. Yeah.
Well, in this commentary, it says
Yeah.
many people in the early church had concerns about life after death. In Thessalonica, Christians worried that loved ones who died before Christ's return might never see Christ. And
They were worried about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Peter's readers need to be reminded that the dead, both the faithful and their oppressors, would be judged.
Yeah. There was this notion that that since Jesus had not come in their lifetime, that they would never see their loved ones again. Yeah. I'm just restating what that says. Yeah, that they wouldn't see them. They said, well, Jesus said He was coming back with it, and He's not back, so I'm lost my loved ones. Whatever happened to them? See, we have a far more advanced theology of death and the afterlife than they did. They only had bits and pieces about it. And I think the commentator there brings up a good point, that there might have been some concern about that here. And that's what Peter was addressing. That we judge them as having done good things, but they're alive in the Spirit of God. So, yeah, it's a tough passage, a couple of tough passages there to have to wade through. But no, as far as I'm with Randall on You know, what do we do with those that never heard? I will trust. God is not a robot, okay? He's a person, and He has mercy. He's not willing. There are certain passages that temper my tendency to go towards judgment and condemnation, okay? Which would say, well, if they didn't hear it, just tough luck. And then that's on us somehow. That's on us because we didn't get to the Congo and didn't get back to that indigenous tribe back there, and that's our fault and they're lost and going to hell for eternity because we didn't get there. Hold on a minute. Our God is God. And I'll just say this also. I think there's a point that could be made. And again, this is a deep rabbit hole. If you want to go into Romans and talk about people who are a law to themselves, you know, I mean, if they have the faith of Abraham, see,
I think it was
So-
in the New Testament that I saw where he said that the people who've never heard, they're not going to be judged.
well, it says if they don't receive the law, right, there's no,
But God's grace will take care of that
yeah.
problem.
Well, I'm not sure I understand it. I don't know if that, right, I don't know if that has application there, but I will just say this.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, I believe that God is a merciful God.
Yes, I do.
The fact that He's provided us a way to be saved is evidence enough of His mercy. But God has always shown more mercy than He had to. Look in the Scriptures. He's always showing more mercy than He has to. How He gives mercy is His prerogative, since He's the one who extends mercy. And so I'd say, that's the God I serve. That's the God I know or hope to know, is a God of mercy. He's a God of justice, yes. People who are rebels, who rebel against God, Peter makes it quite clear. You know, there's death. There's real death there, eternal death and damnation. But for those who never heard, I will leave that to God. He may, in some way, communicate His gospel to them. That is up to Him. I don't know. He's not made me privy to any of His plans like that, so.
Was it Christ and Paul, or one of the other writers that said that it'd be better for somebody not to have ever known God than to know God and then not
To know him and then
obey Him.
obey.
He was talking about Tyre and Sidon when he said that. It'll be more tolerable for you than on the day of Sodom and Gomorrah. That didn't mean it's tolerable. It just says it's more tolerable. I don't,
Well,
you
that
know.
makes sense, that,
You know.
it's gonna be better, if you hear the gospel and you don't obey it, then that's on you.
That's right. You hear the gospel and you don't respond to it. That's correct. That's on. Once that person has heard that message, if you say no to that message, you're responsible for having said no to the message.
You know, there's some people that believe that Christ is not going to come back until all areas of the earth have had the gospel preached to them.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how they can come across that way, but there are some people that feel that way.
Well.
I couldn't hear that very well. They believe what?
They believe that Christ won't come back until, God's not going to send Christ back until all areas of the earth have been exposed to the gospel.
Well, that may be true. I think that.
Mark
Who
McCarthy
knows?
looked that up. In
Okay.
Matthew 24:14,
Mm-hmm.
the New International Version says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations."
Right. Right. And then the end will come. Yeah. But if you go further in the passage in Matthew 24, the end comes, the Jerusalem temple. That's that part of Romans, that part of Matthew 24 leads to what I believe is the destruction of, it's after that he talks about the ultimate end after that. So,
But that's the verse where they get that.
and I say, yeah. And this is, and listen, I think there's a lot of ambiguity there. I mean, we could argue that. Lots of people smarter than we are have argued both sides of that issue. Say, well, it hasn't happened yet, and then some people have said it's already happened. So anyway, it's something worth thinking about. But I just think God knows it all. I'm going to let Him handle it. and who he wants. And there is a passage that says, God shows mercy on whom he will have mercy. That means that I am not the judge of who's in and who's out. It is only my job to carry the message to as many people for as long as I can, to tell the message of Jesus to people. That's my job. I'll let the Lord do the sifting. Way above our pay grade. Well, considering that God paid the price, doesn't he have the right to decide who that applies to? I mean, he sent his son, and it's his son's blood. So he has the prerogative to decide to do with people what he wants to do with people. The blood has already been shed. See, this is where I don't get all wound up about the thief on the cross. People say, well, the thief on the cross wasn't baptized. So what? God has the prerogative of saving anybody at any time.
Yeah, but in that case, the deal is, that was the old law.
No, no, because at the time, let me suggest something to you. Now think about this fact. Jesus and his disciples were already commanding baptism. Commanding it. John the Baptizer had commanded it. Jesus was commanding it of his followers as well. Jesus himself was baptized in response to God's will for his life, so that he would be obedient to God. Now, if Jesus, the Son of God, to fulfill all righteousness, to be in obedience to God, was baptized, don't you think that applies to everybody?
Because people use
it sure does.
People use it like, if he didn't get baptized, so we don't have to get baptized.
Don't worry about it, Gabe. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Here's the deal. Jesus pronounced it done. Well, how did he have the right to do that? Because he's God and I'm not. That's it. If he wants to do it, he can do it. And I hope to see people in heaven one day that I didn't expect to see there.
That's why Peter can say, why, the kid will say, why?
Right, because I'm the parent. I don't have to explain everything to you. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.